Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts to get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
All right, everybody, we are back here on a lovely Thursday. We're almost there to the weekend. And live from Denver, Colorado, this is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Thanks for making us a part of your lovely evening. I've got a stacked one here for you. Happy opening day to everybody, all you Major League Baseball fans out there. We made it. 5 long months. We finally made it. And what better way to kick off baseball than a 2-interview lineup. Connor Webb of the Couch GM is going to be joining me here in a couple minutes. He's talking a lot about the Seattle Mariners opening day and so much more. I'm excited about that. And Jeremy Case is going to be on the case with us, but he's talking about the South Stands podcast. He's back. I'm excited to have him back on with us on Sports Wave Network. So we're going to kick it off in just about a few minutes from here before we end up introducing our guests. So opening day is the most, it's unlike any other day in major sports. And it's the kind of holiday baseball fans just get excited for. 5 months they wait for. Now you talk about, the off season, you talk about pitchers, catchers report, and then you start talking about spring training, kicking up to where here we are in opening day. It's the longest time of the year. In 162 games a year, anything could possibly happen. Now, baseball, since I've grown up as a kid, baseball's always flowed through in my family. It's always been in our blood. My biological father used to play pro ball in the minor leagues with the Dodgers, Braves, and the Giants. And then my stepdad used to play catcher years ago, and his backup catcher was Kansas City Royals Hall of Famer Mike Sweeney. And so we've always loved baseball. Baseball's always what has shaped my life from when I was a kid and to where I am today, talking sports with all of you. Baseball has always taught me about how to overcome adversities. You're in the batter's box and life is just throwing you whatever it wants to. The only question you got to ask yourself every time you're there, how do I adjust? How do I get better? How do I be the best version of myself? Baseball is arguably one of the greatest when you talk about long-time history. You talk about shaping to be the best version of yourself. You're overcoming adversity. You're holding yourself to a higher standard, and it's holding accountability. And it's a lot. It takes a tear on you physically, mentally, emotionally, and a lot of those things. But baseball, what it does and the beauty of it, yes, it's a long season. It gets tiring. But at the same time, there's always windows of opportunities to getting better. Every game, every series, every year. So for a lot of you baseball fans that are out there, I am so happy for all of you guys to finally be there and excited to be watching your favorite teams on television or you go to the games. I can't wait for my wife and I living in Denver. We've passed by multiple times. I can't wait to go to Coors Field and watch the Rockies, but I don't particularly watch the Rockies as much. But when they play the Dodgers or they play the Phillies or they play the Braves, it's just a national kind of thing that's exciting for everybody because you're witnessing the greatest stars out on that field. I've only been to one major league game in the old Yankee Stadium, and I got to tell you, the feeling from watching the game in the stands to then touring and being down there at home plate amongst the rest of the greatest players from both Yankees history and from baseball history, period, to just feel that energy, soak it all in. It's the greatest feeling ever. And then to be there at the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, a lot of you guys may think, oh, we know who our obvious World Series champions are going to be. Baseball's so unpredictable. I mean, yes, we can have odds, the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, the Cubs, multiple teams that could, quote unquote, make the playoffs. Yes, they can. They can make the postseason. But to win a World Series, it takes a lot. You all thought the Dodgers were going to be the World Series favorites. That was unpredictable. The Arizona Diamondbacks proved us, you don't need a super team. You just got to have a great team with a great culture, with a great camaraderie. I mean, Corbin Carroll in his rookie season to get to the World Series is unbelievable. And then you look at the Texas Rangers to beating the Astros to where they were, where they did not have home field advantage and win the World Series for the first time in its 63-year history. Baseball's known for history, but baseball's also known to defy the odds. Even if the odds are against you, you find ways, you get better, you start to target a lot of different spots. Now, of course, you're dealing with this whole thing that there's high payroll organizations, Yankees, Dodgers, and etc. And then there's low payroll, the A's, the Rockies, the Pirates, so many different, organizations that are on low payrolls that it's so hard for them to get superstars, which in some point in 2028, you'll have the future home of the A's in Las Vegas. Good for them. I don't trust their owner, honestly. I'm not a big fan, but I'm all about the organization trying to get better, getting with the program, and eventually being in a big money market to go and buy players because it's a non-salary cap league. So hopefully they get the right thing. Baseball is always full of questions. That's why I love this. That's why I love opening day every year. It's the best time of year, springing forward. You're out there. I mean, in Denver, I cannot wait when the grass is green, the skies are blue, the temperatures are amazing, and you could just smell the breath of the fresh air. You're also sipping on a cold, refreshing beverage. And yeah, I'm going to be sipping on Coors and Coors Field. Why not? And then you got the best food, and then you got the best entertainment. So pull up a chair, enjoy it, drink it in. Happy opening day, folks. And with that, bringing on aboard to be talking about opening day, and I had to search far and wide for the best around the Pacific Northwest, and I just so happened to come across the best one there. Connor Webb, the Couch GM, joining us here on the show. So first of all, happy opening day to you, my friend. I mean, Mariners fans have got to be loving it to be down there up in T-Mobile Park, man. I mean, do you have a single opening day memory that you can go back that was just the best one you'll never forget?
Happy opening day to you as well. It's a really exciting time for baseball fans, for Mariners fans. I don't have necessarily one in mind, but because I actually live 2.5 hours south of Seattle, so I get up there as often as I can. And whenever I have media credentials, then that's when I really get up there. So I'm not there opening day today, unfortunately, but just when baseball comes back around, it's always such a long off season. The Mariners fans, we don't know what the front office might be doing. Some of the moves that happen at the beginning of the off season aren't the greatest, on paper or the greatest look, but then by the time you get to spring training, by the time you get to opening day, there's always a reason to be excited, and this is definitely another year to be excited.
And you got to think about it because baseball, like it has been in my life, like I started off, is that it's a game that defies the odds. Because again, everybody could basically put their chips in and think, oh, the Dodgers are going to represent the World Series. The Astros are going to be back in. But the Diamondbacks and Rangers gave us something different last season. So when you start looking into this season, and as you know, Ohtani now is a Dodger, the Braves are starting to get, loading up. I mean, how do you kind of outlook this baseball season? Because in the end, you'll have those high talented teams, but maybe there's a Cinderella story team that might be out there. How do you kind of outlook this 24 season?
Yeah, Ken, as you were talking about, there's definitely the teams and the franchises that are going to have the higher payrolls year over year. They're going to get the Otanis, and the Braves are loaded. There's always going to be the teams that are going to come out of the woodworks. Like last year, who expected the Diamondbacks to be in the World Series? Even the Rangers, really. They signed a bunch of guys, but they signed, old starting pitching veterans that had injury histories. That they hit the IL. Then they're kind of scrambling. But there's the stories like the Baltimore Orioles are going to be a really fun team to watch. The Seattle Mariners again this year. Like MLB just came out with their rankings of the top starting rotations. The Mariners are at the top of their list. If you watch my Mariners preview videos, it could be a historic rotation that the Mariners have. They could have one of the top bullpens in the league, and then retooling, their lineup this coming into this year really puts them in a great spot to be one of those Cinderella stories to finally make it to the World Series, since they are the only franchise that has not yet made it to a World Series.
And it's kind of funny. So speaking of the Mariners, because growing up watching baseball, I recall watching like on my television. I loved the days when I watched Griffey Jr. I loved watching the days when Ichiro was the big thing internationally. And it just, that 116 game winning season, that will forever be enshrined in Seattle history. So when you look at the Mariners from back then and what they are right now, because I'm happy for the city of Seattle to finally have that energy back and to finally have a really decent rotation, a really good lineup that starts from their caliber in Julio Rodriguez. How do you just, going from history and what they are right now? This had been a long time coming for the Mariners, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, in 2022, they broke their 20-year playoff drought. I was there for that game in Seattle. Unfortunately, they got swept by the Astros. But the energy in the city when, the playoffs were back in Seattle, it's going to happen again this year. And I expect them to make a deep run. It's an electric time in Electric City. And that's where, comparing their starting rotation to every single rotation that they've had in the past, this year has the potential to be the best starting rotation in franchise history. And, I was talking with Gary Hill Jr., who's a regular broadcaster for the Mariners. And he says, I think that statement is, unquestionable. That's just, you look at from top to bottom, 1 through 5, every guy has the ability to go out there and control the outcome of the game. They're all throwing 95 plus with disgusting off-speed stuff. It's, Luis Castillo at the top, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby. All three of those guys are in the top 10 in Cy Young, favorites for the AL. So it's going to be a scary good rotation, historic, like I said, and they could make history again this year.
So talking about it with Luis Castillo, because when I watched that trade from him going from Cincinnati to Seattle, and you looked at how good his mechanics were and how he got control of a lot of his pitches. And I think the Mariners kind of looked at it and saying, this guy is going to be the pinnacle of what our rotation is meant to be. Like, how impressed were you when he got here and then now being the opening day starter for this organization? This is kind of where it all starts. Do you think this is a guy that to start it out with, he's going to definitely ride that train along and get them to a point where this is what solid pitching is going to look like for Seattle and even in their competition in the AL West?
Yeah, so he was acquired at the trade deadline in 2022 when the Mariners were making that push for the playoffs, and to add a legit ace to the front of your rotation. And that's just, it's a huge impact move. And the Mariners gave up quite a bit in top prospects, Noel Marte, Edwin Arroyo, just to name a couple of them. There's been news since about, Noel Marte, Arroyo's out for the year. But to add Luis Castillo, no matter how much it cost, and at that time, it was just for a year and a half of him. The Mariners were able to extend him beyond that for a few more years now. And so to have Luis Castillo, his nickname's La Piedra, the Rock. He really is the rock of the rotation. George Kirby has the potential to win that Cy Young this year. He has the potential with his elite command and put away stuff to be an ace. Gilbert, in his own right, could be an ace in a lot of these franchises. So to have the top three, really, then you add Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, but to have Luis Castillo at the top, like you mentioned, as the staple of the lineup, I think is massive.
So let's talk Julio Rodriguez, because, when the kid came into the scene at his rookie season, the kid was just fantastic. He brought up a lot of speed. He was a 5-tool type stud. He gave you speed, he gave you contacts, and he gave you power, but he was also somebody that the Mariners, for a very long time, was looking for somebody that could be the potential face of this franchise, because it has been a long time. From Griffey Jr., they thought they would have found that staple with Robinson Cano, but I felt like Rodriguez just felt so right to me. So last season, I don't think it was necessarily he suffered a sophomore slump. He still had solid numbers. I think he's in the caliber, and I predicted this, that I think he's going to be sneaky good this year, that I think we might consider him in the top 5 of MVP. How do you kind of outlook that?
Yeah, I think there's no question that he's right there in the MVP race. He's going to be there every year, really. One thing to note is that, last year after his rookie campaign, he started to show off his personality and people saw who he was. MLB really put him in the limelight or the spotlight, and he started, taking deals here and there with different brands. And as he has talked about through interviews this offseason, he started to pull back on that stuff this offseason, and heading into this year, he's going to focus on himself and his preparation more than anything. Last year where he was signing a ton of autographs, talking to media, doing all these things, he's going to be much more limited heading into this year, and to focus on the results so that, like you look at his stats, that's not a slump, but it was a regression from his rookie year technically. But heading into this year, he has a different kind of focus. He's wanting to be the best player on the field. It's very realistic to see a 40-40 season out of him this year. We saw 40-70 out of Acuna. As high as the ceiling is for Acuna, there's no reason why Julio Rodriguez can't be at that same tier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved watching him too, even from the World Baseball Classic, and just, a guy that really showed like the type of player and the type of person that he really is, a personality, like loving guy that I think Seattle fans really are so thankful to have and to really build around. So I think this is going to be the biggest come up for him. I do smell all-star selection. I do smell a top 5 MVP. I think this kid is just fantastic. He just honestly fits the bill of what the Mariners have been searching for a very long time. I'm excited for this kid in his 24 campaign. So as being Nab, the couch GM, now I got to say, Jerry DiPoto got busy this offseason. And so, and I think one of the sacrifices, and part of that, they lose Eugenio Suarez, in trade to the Arizona Diamondbacks. But, he sat down and really had to kind of get very thorough of, we have the group. We have the team of even building from our farm. He had to get serious. And so when you start to, look at Jerry DiPoto's mind, going through this offseason, this is the most important that we've seen the Astros. We just saw the Rangers win a World Series. It was time for these boys to step up. What was kind of your look with Jerry DiPoto this offseason?
Yeah, so the whole reason for the offseason and the moves is that shortly after the offseason started, there was news that came out that Root Sports, which is the cable television network that the Mariners had bought, Comcast was moving up Root Sports to a higher package. So fans were going to have to pay more per month just to watch Mariners games. And they were also already doing bad as far as subscriber loss. And so with potential revenue shortages, basically the news came out that the Mariners are going to be restricted with payroll. And so that led to the moves that followed in the trade of Eugenio Suarez and his contract, in the trade of Jared Kelenic to the Braves, along with Evan White and Marco Gonzalez to offload those contracts. They gave Jared Kelenic in order for the Braves to do so. And then there was the trade for, trading away Robbie Ray and his multiple years left on his contract. So the reason for a lot of those moves was because of the payroll issues that the Mariners were seeing in the future. But then, the moves that they made to bring in guys with some of those contracts that were freed up, they were able to sign Mitch Garver on Christmas Eve. It was basically a tale of two halves for this offseason. One was the partial teardown, to where, fans were like, what is going on? Trading Jared Kelenic, a top prospect. Eugenio Suarez was a lineup guy. Teoscar Hernandez hit free agency, but then you get Mitch Garver, and then you trade for Mitch Haniger. You go and trade for Jorge Polanco, which is a guy that Mariners fans have been wanting for a while. Second base has been a black hole for the Mariners for a while. And so to have Polanco there is going to be a big piece. But yeah, I think, looking at it today compared to, a month into the offseason, I think the lineup looks great. It goes from a lineup that was largely reliant in walks, strikeouts, and home runs to a much more consistent lineup you're going to see guys making contact a lot more. You're not going to see as many bases loaded, no outs, grounding into double plays, or just striking out and not scoring any runs. There's going to be a lot more consistent run production this year on top of that elite pitching.
Now, see, I always say this for my fans, is that, listen, that's the kind of baseball I know and love right there, because I will rather take that than to be out in, Hollywood and just, hitting home runs, striking out, X amount of times. But it's like, when I watched the best World Series I think I've ever watched in my life was the 14 Giants Royals, because it was like, you didn't rely on, home runs. You relied on smart pitching. You relied on smart batting and trying to drive in runs and trying to rattle pitchers' cages. So that kind of philosophy in the mind, and even for a lot of these guys in Seattle, I mean, that's got to be the outlook in order to win the games, to win playoff games, and make it a deeper run to getting in potentially to the World Series. Now, on the side note on that, since you mentioned about it with, Root Sports and Comcast Sports, I got to ask you, because when I grew up as a kid, I used to love it when it was so simplistic when it came to airing it out on television. We had Fox Sports Prime Ticket and West, and then we had a lot of others, and they were all in one place. Now I've got Valley Sports, I've got Root Sports, there's so many other subscriptions from here. And I've said it in this way: the more this happens, sometimes you try to upcharge the subscriptions. Sometimes it kind of takes a little bit of a toll of your fan base, because they want to watch the game. They may not end up going to it, going to the ballparks, but they may want to watch the game to where it's easier. Do you have a thought on that? Because I've just had that kind of thought for years about this, that I'm like, why can't Major League Baseball just be simplistic when it came to television airing of all 30 clubs?
Yeah, it's not, an easy solution or easy answer. One, because, the Mariners and other teams have contracts with these companies and Comcast and whoever their TV providers are. So until that contract is up, they really don't have the flexibility that might be needed to be on the good side of fans. Fans have been pretty upset. One, because the Mariners haven't been willing to spend on payroll in the past few years. Then you come back to them and say, hey, I know we just missed the playoffs after making the playoffs for the first time in 20 years, but now we're going to need you to pay more to watch the team that you love. And so everything is moving towards streaming and towards independent media. So at some point after these big contracts are up, I assume that, if the Mariners have the Mariners app, to where you can pay $30 a month or $20 a month, something like that, to watch all the Mariners games there just on the app, fans would sign up in a heartbeat, because then you can get rid of the big cable package. You could just basically go a la carte, to where you're picking whatever individual things that you want to be watching. So that's where everything is moving, it seems like. And if that turns into, like a Major League Baseball thing to where you just do a subscription like MLB.tv, but every team is included instead of all these blackouts. Rob Manfred talks about wanting to grow the game. If you want to grow the game, you got to get rid of the blackouts and actually allow people to watch all the games that they want to.
Yeah, see, and I've said this multiple times. I mean, ever since we had the shutdown in 2020, that was plenty of time to get rid of the blackout, especially if you're in the LA County area or you're up there in the Pacific Northwest. It's like, come on, man. Like I paid this subscription to not have this blackout. And you had at the very least an entire year to figure this out. And then it's like, nope, they still are going through the subscription. So I don't know. I just hope at some point they get it through that, like, this is what hurts fan bases. And usually you don't get as much of this than you should if you just simplify it in the right ways, kind of come up with it where it's much more, financially friendly. And, you start growing fan bases and more people enjoy baseball. That's why, the NFL is so king for it, because we've got so many different matchups and it's becoming more globally. And then you're getting everything. We're in baseball. It's slowly making that mark because the pace of play is starting to speed up now with the pitch clock and so much more. But hopefully they could figure this out with the television rights and with all of this, so we could get rid of these blackouts and hopefully everybody can just enjoy baseball the same. Quickly, because I've revealed my top 10 teams in my previous episode. So from 10 to 1, I have the Reds, Mariners, Yankees, D-backs, Astros, Rangers, Orioles, Phillies, Braves, and Dodgers. I just think with this top 10, when putting the Mariners there at night, I love their rotation. It's very young, and Luis Castillo is that pillar of that rotation. But I also do like how underrated that lineup really is. When you go from Julio Rodriguez to Cal Raleigh and a lot of these guys, I mean, Seattle, when you look at the American League as a whole, you go and start the postseason today. I mean, I see them really, getting into a good series against the Yankees. I think between the Astros, I see a 7-game series again, but I do think there's unfinished business from there. How do you kind of shape that if, in fact, the postseason were to start? What the Mariners have to expect in order for them to get to the road to the World Series?
Yeah, for the Mariners, it's going to be the health of the starting rotation as well as the lineup. That's the only question about the Mariners lineup, is the health of Mitch Garver, of Mitch Haniger, of some of these guys, on top of their starting rotation staying healthy. For the most part, they've been very healthy in the prior years, aside from Robbie Ray going down last year. But, they have the depth, and Brian Wu is starting the year on the injured list right now, but they have Emerson Hancock, who just came up to fill that spot. I think the Mariners, they have a good shot at winning the AL West. Of course, the Astros are always going to be a contender. They also have their health concerns in the rotation. They have a few guys starting on the IL right now. The Rangers, again, health. The DeGrom, Scherzer, all those older guys in the rotation. A lot of these teams have the same problems. The Yankees, they have a stacked offense. Garrett Cole is starting the season on the IL. So I think the Mariners are in a great spot right now. For the most part, they're completely healthy. It's just maintaining that health. And then they can beat any of these teams in a 5-game series.
So Mitch Haniger coming back to the Mariners. I mean, I loved watching him in his time in Seattle because he was the prime example of what a smart hitter's supposed to look like. I watch Justin Turner every year, and the guy is he's slapping it to right field every time he's got a chance and scoring in those runs. I get the same vibe from Mitch Haniger. So he does take, I believe it was 1 year off, and then comes back to Seattle. How do you outlook Mitch Haniger this year? Because are you going to get this kind of the similar vibe from when he was previously in Seattle and to coming into this year?
Yeah, I did not have Mitch Haniger returning to Seattle on my bingo card this offseason. He's had the injury concerns, and it's been various different things. They're all completely fluky injuries also when you look at it. In 2021, he had a 39 home run, 100 RBI season. So that Mitch Haniger is still somewhere in him. And if it's all about health, like what I just talked about, if they can keep him healthy, and that's where the platoons of Dominic Canzone and Luke Raley to help balance out so that if he needs off days, that they have those guys to plug in there. Mitch Haniger, the leadership that he brings, the passion that he brings, he was a part of that team that broke the drought. Bringing him back is a lot more than just what the production that he can bring on the field is. It's in the clubhouse. It's helping those younger guys. And so I'm really excited to see Mitch Haniger. He was actually the first Mariner jersey that I personally bought when we traded for him back in like 2017. So yeah, really excited to see Mitch Haniger on top of Mitch Garver. We got the two Mitches. Yeah, Mitch 2.0.
There you go. And you know what, Mitch Haniger, he wears my favorite number, love 17, man. And so anytime, like I tell people all the time, you see that number, just you're going to expect a clutch hit, whether it's a homer or it's just scoring in 2 runs on an opposite field hit. So I'm excited for this, man. And I do got to ask a fun question before letting you go. So being in like the Pacific Northwest, I got to know what the culture is like from here, because I mean, when I watch Seahawk fans, when they got to the Super Bowl at least 3 times in their organization's history, finally winning one. Thanks, Russ. Can't seem to do it in Denver, but the vibe there, they are so invested, from Seahawks to Mariners. And then now you've got them with the Seattle Kraken, which I'm really excited about. But I am also one of those people that's still pulling for the Supersonics return. And I'm like, it's got to happen. I mean, like, how do you view the Pacific Northwest? Because I've never been to Seattle before. My sister's visited there. She's been to the Pop Culture Museum. She's been to a lot of those places. It's a beautiful spot. Very much a lot of humidity and a lot of moisture up out there. So what's the culture like there?
As far as the culture, it's a great sports town, great sports city. The summers in Seattle, you really can't beat it. Like you mentioned, it's absolutely gorgeous out here. It's the mountains, it's the water, it's the evergreen trees. You got to come check it out sometime. Colorado is amazing, but Seattle also. The culture, the fans are passionate. When you're still supporting a team after 20 years of not winning, you could say, that kind of speaks to the culture of the city and the fan base that are rooting for the Mariners. And so of course the Sonics deserve to come back. The Kraken, I haven't been to a game yet, but I've seen videos and heard people talking about it, and it's a perfect city for sports, and it's perfect city for the Mariners to do something this year.
Man, now you just put it right there on my bucket list of places to visit for there. Me and my wife, we love traveling. We love going to different spots, So we definitely will have that right there up on our list. But yeah, last year, I will say, side note, I was pulling for the Kraken to get there to the Western Conference Final against Vegas, because I would have loved seeing 2 expansion teams for the first time ever just being in a conference final. That would have just been absolutely bonkers for Seattle, and just really excited for the future. So appreciate you, man. Always bringing in great stuff, man. Where can people find you, catching up on Mariners and more of what the Couch GM's got on his mind?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You could just look up the Couch GM across platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you name it. Look for the guy sitting on the couch with the baseball hat, and that's my logo. So yeah, I'm trying to put out as much quality content on the Mariners and baseball as I can. I'm definitely going to expand more this year to talk about current trending topics, not just the Mariners, although they of course are going to be the focus. And it's going to be a really fun year, a lot of fun teams to watch. So make sure to tune in.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, you're doing an absolute fantastic job. Keep it up, man. And as everybody, in the industry that we work in, man, it gets tiring. It's a lot, but you know what? Quality is what produces the quantity, man. So love exactly all the content that you got. I'm keeping an eye out on the Mariners, because again, they're my sneaky dark horse team to really make some serious noise in the 24 season. But appreciate you, Connor. Thanks for stopping on by. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, guys, like I said, baseball season, like I said, is always about defying the odds, and you'll never know what you're going to get. It's unpredictable, but it's the fun time of year, and I just love it every single year. So, all right, we're shifting over now for a great friend of mine. You all have been familiarized with him, former co-host, and now making his way back up into the scene. My good friend, he's got now a new podcast for diehard Bronco fans out there. As you know, for me living in Denver now, you guys got to definitely check this out. The South Stands podcast and my good friend running it, Jeremy Case. All right, well, we got to talk a lot about this with the new podcast, The South Stands, and for diehard Denver fans, explaining to our audience really what solidifies the South Stands and what the significance of this name and what it has meant for diehard Bronco fans that have been there, that have seen it, and that have basically gone through those waves for Bronco seasons.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on, Jake. I appreciate it again. I don't know how many times we've done this, but it never seems to get old no matter how many times we do it. Yeah, so in every team in the NFL, every fan base has their special things. I mean, Seattle's got the 12th man. There's various monikers for other fan bases across the NFL. And growing up in Denver, going to Broncos games my whole entire childhood and everything, it was always told to me that the South Stands in Mile High Stadium was where the real absolute Broncos fans were. That's where all the hardcore fans, all the diehard fans were. For the Broncos was in the South Stands, and till this day, I mean, it's still a lot. It kind of expanded now since the invention of PSLs and all that stuff, but for the most part, the South Stand still is the majority of season ticket holders, really diehard Broncos fans, and the lower section of Mile High Stadium pretty much is where all the season ticket holders are as well. And I just kind of wanted to invent a show around that to try and bring some rationale, kind of, if sort of speak to Broncos country, and not necessarily, we are fans, me and my co-host Jake, but we want to kind of bring a little different spin to Broncos country for it. So
I love it, man. And like I said, I mean, I've already been to an Avs game up in Ball Arena. It was a totally different vibe from there, but I have yet to visit, Empower Field at Mile High. I can't wait to see it. I mean, the ticket prices are just, they're as fair as it comes, man. And so I can't wait to see the energy and the vibe there in Mile High. But I do got to say, so playing a soundbite for you to take a listen up on this one, because I have sent this in the chat before, but this was rather interesting. And so the Broncos had a lot of work to do throughout this offseason. And of course, they've moved on now from Russell Wilson. So Sandy Clough, he basically sounded off on this. So to play the soundbite, love to hear your thoughts on this matter, how he outlooked the Denver Broncos.
Broncos have been very good at one thing the last 8 years, finding scapegoats. They have majored in scapegoat. They have been the biggest scapegoating organization in major professional sports for 8 years. If not the worst, then the one that is most anxious to scapegoat, act in simplistic fashion, speak in terms that are designed to fool the public, when the only people the Broncos are kidding are the Broncos themselves. And those ridiculous statements continue. They came out of the combine last week from Sean Payton, to an extent from George Payton, the nominal general manager of the Denver Broncos, who made this disastrous trade.
So, I mean, he's kind of onto something with it, if you ask me, but what was your thoughts up on that? Is that kind of something that's been like a skeleton in their closet that Denver really needs to clean this mess up? Because it just seems like this since 2016, they got to really get real with themselves.
yeah, so I mean, just a really brief history here. Sandy Clough, the guy, he's a very, very well known name in Denver sports radio history. He's been at it for the better half of about 40 years, doing sports talk radio in Denver. And he's somebody I've frequented growing up listening to sports talk radio in Denver. He's a very, very iconic figure in Denver sports history. He knows a lot about what he's talking about. He's done it. To a degree, I agree with Sandy, to a degree. I think, yes, there have been some scapegoatish moves by the Denver Broncos within the last 8 years. But also, I honestly think of just some honest, genuine mistakes as well, kind of lumped in with that. I mean, obviously, you had the sale of the team 2 years ago. That prompted a lot of, I don't know, like when you go to sell a house, you kind of don't mention some things and you try to enhance other features to progress the sale of that or maybe increase the value of that sale. I feel like the Broncos have done some of that with, obviously getting Russell Wilson. There's been a lot of moves like that to try and boost the value of the team. It was the sale of the team was under a lot of unfortunate circumstances with a bunch of turmoil within the Bolin family that kind of spearheaded some of the I guess scapegoatish type moves that Sandy Clough is talking about. But I don't think it's totally true to a degree because of that very thing. I do think within the last after the sale of the team with Nathaniel Hackett coming in and then now Sean Payton I feel like Nathaniel Hackett probably had kind of no idea what he was doing. The ownership group that came in, not necessarily football owners, probably had no idea what they were doing, kind of turned it over to George Payton as a whole. And honestly, it feels like the Broncos have been for like the last 8 years kind of kicking the can down the road on certain things as well. And it's showed up, and it was very brutal last year. Showed up in many, many different ways of what kicking the can down the road as a franchise can do to you. And trying to try to put Band-Aids on things that need casts. So yeah, I for the most part I agree with Sandy. There's just to a point to where it ends because you're in any sale of a team. I mean, I know the Baltimore Orioles are going through it right now with their sale of their team. You're going to make moves to try to boost the value of that franchise. So you can get out of there, and they kind of like, sadly enough, it's the previous owners, even though it has been a big name that has been tied to the Denver Broncos franchise since about 10 years after its very inception. They kind of really just didn't care what was going to happen as long as they got their money and got out. Sadly, that's not a reflection of Pat Bolin himself, but unfortunately his children. Not to necessarily talk bad about them, but that's kind of just, if we look at it for what it is, that's what happened. Yeah, so to a degree, I agree with Sandy, but there's also a little bit of caveats within that as well.
Well, and I will tell you this. I mean, especially when you get a new ownership, I get it. For instance, the Commanders needed a new ownership because thank God they're away from, the reckonings that basically Dan Snyder has left on this franchise for years and years, from not even just from players and staffs, but from the whole fan base itself. So I was like, that was a huge win. And they did the right thing by not even just from what last year gave them, but going in this offseason. Adam Peters, a smart guy from San Francisco. You load up the defense. You load up on a bunch of offensive pieces. You get Dan Quinn, who's got, he's got nothing to really give as far as we play in football. We're invested in football. That's what we're trying to do. And then you look at the Orioles, where I was very happy for Baltimore because they were in dire need of an owner that was not afraid to spend. They needed a Steve Cohen type, but smart enough that the second they got Corbin Burns, I was like, oh yeah, this is how it starts. Once you get a new ownership and you finally get that money in the bank, this is where now this is going to be a team well invested in it. So when I think of the Broncos with this, I think George Payton made the biggest mistake when it came to, you acquired Russ, you paid Russ way too early before he even had like 8 games at least on the field. Then we would have had contract extension talks. I would have wanted to see how this thing fit. But now he's got to fix up this mess. In comes Sean Payton. He's mentioned this to him before. Listen, you're the one who created this mess. I'm here in a position where I got to get this team right. I got to shape this culture back to where it needs to be. And I got to have the right guy at the helm at quarterback. So as you look on it, I watched a video when they asked about Sean Payton if that was the hardest decision that they've ever made when considering the cap hell hit and then, Russ basically leaving. Oh, he's just nonchalantly, sipping his coffee and saying, no, it wasn't. I love Sean Payton for that reason because he's so passionate, but he's very real. He's the kind that if you do not mesh with his coaching style, you're not going to make it. So in terms of quarterback, because we've seen this with Drew Brees for years, going in this year, how do we really outlook this position? Because I'll be honest with you, this is not going to start with Jarrett Stidham. I'll tell you that this much. How do you kind of see that and how Sean Payton really envisions the quarterback position?
Well, I mean, first it can't just start with Jarrett Stidham. The Broncos need at least bring, I think it's like 2 or 3 quarterbacks on the roster they have to bring into training camp by league requirement. So it can't just be Jarrett Stidham. No, there's going to be other candidates. I think the Broncos right now are biding their time until after the draft to see what happens in the draft, what they can make happen in the draft if it's feasible, if it's doable, to try and see what they can make. I mean, they obviously have been conducting a few interviews with some quarterbacks to draft here within the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure that'll continue leading right up until the draft. I do know one thing, though, and that's Sean Payton. I mean, say what you want about him. Everybody has their opinion about him. He seems to be a pretty polarizing coach and has been for years. The one thing I know for sure that Sean Payton is not is a dummy. Is incompetent, is, you don't cut Russell Wilson and take that big of a salary cap hit without a plan. You just don't. You have to have a plan in place. And I know Sean Payton's thinking about it, and he's a guy who typically plays close to the vest. He doesn't really, he very much controls what he wants the media to know, what the media puts out there. And in a way, I really like that because, it's got me hanging in suspense of what could happen. I mean, it's got me feeling pretty hopeful as a Broncos fan, honestly. And I think Sean Payton feels that way too, because he also realizes, as it stands right now, if the Broncos, because they chose to take the majority of the cap hit of the Russell Wilson contract, as it stands right now, they will have close to about $100 million in cap space come next year. So he kind of is looking toward the future, not necessarily the immediate future being this season. I think this season is going to be what it's going to be, and an evaluation season for most of the team to bring in a few pieces. I mean, you saw it the other day. We signed, I forget who it was from the Detroit Lions. We signed
Josh Reynolds. Yep.
Yeah, we signed him. I think it's going to be a lot of under the radar moves, because Sean Payton has been pretty famous of taking guys who were not necessarily working in other teams, other places, and making them shine and making them stars in the surrounding cast of a quarterback. I mean, when he got Drew Brees, a lot of people, the narrative on Drew Brees at the time was he had torn his rotator cuff or his shoulder, I believe, and everybody thought he was done. There was no coming back for him when he left San Diego and got traded over to New Orleans. So I don't know where the Broncos go. I'm not an expert on that. I don't try to be an expert on that. I just know whatever's going to happen. I trust the moves of Sean Payton because he seems to be a guy that knows what he wants to do. And to all the Broncos fans out there who just want to be contrarian to Sean Payton or to slight his every move because they don't like who he is as a person. If you know more than football about Sean Payton, then I challenge you to go get a job in the NFL and try your hand at it there, because this guy, yes, he's been away from the game a long time. It has, and we kind of saw that with John Gruden, how he left the game for 10 years, came back and didn't really work out in his favor. But I think those were a lot of that had to do with extenuating a lot of that had to do with outside circumstances and instances that led to the end of his tenure as the Raiders head coach, as we all know. But right now, I don't know what direction it's going to go. And for anybody to speculate is, to me, just trying to be the guy that said, see, I told you so, while taking a shot in the dark, because nobody knows. Not even everybody close. I mean, you're there in Denver, Jake, and a lot of media, they don't even know. There's a lot of speculation, there's a lot of guessing, but nobody knows for sure, and that's probably one of the best things about it, because it's going to make the draft that much more interesting to watch.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
There's so much right now, like this year with the draft, and to getting into that and mentioning about it. So out goes Jerry Jeudy, because I think the problem everybody had was too many drop balls, not as consistent enough as we thought that he would have been coming out of Alabama. But now in comes Josh Reynolds. I feel like Reynolds plugging him in kind of helps with as far as the rehabbing of Tim Patrick coming back from injury. How did you kind of outlook this move? I mean, because I think ultimately I love Josh Reynolds as a red zone friendly receiver. And I think that might be important, and even for the slow rebuilding of Tim Patrick coming back from injury.
Yeah, I honestly, I feel like it could be a really good under the radar move. I mean, we signed him to a 2-year deal. I think that was. So it's a 2-year deal. Like I said, it goes along the lines of, I feel like it's going to be an evaluation season. Bring a couple of guys in that you wouldn't necessarily, think that you'd bring in. A couple of guys that have potential, that could work out, that could fit you, and it could be tailored to your offensive system and the way you want to run things, and see how it all shakes out. I think a lot of these deals that Sean Payton and the Broncos are making right now are, I think they're prove it deals. I think come in, prove it. So we'll see what you got. And if it works, great. We'll sign you to an extension, because they will have that money come start next year, and going forward, it'll only increase more. So there will be opportunity for players to get paid, and for the Broncos to potentially find some diamonds in the rough here.
Yeah, and so ultimately, because now this just came out that potential draftee now, Michael Penix from Washington, he's now meeting up with 5 teams in his camp, and the 2 of those are the Raiders and the Broncos. Now, I do feel like, and to me personally, my favorite pick for the Broncos really moving forward is a guy like Bo Nix. I just think because he has a similar upbringing, like what Justin Herbert had in 2020, because people thought that this guy throws erratic. This guy doesn't really throw a whole lot. He trusts a lot of his legs. But then as soon as he comes into the league, he's already taken the league by storm. I mean, he's already considered the top 5 best quarterback right now in the league. So when I look at Bo Nix with the amount of starts he's had in Oregon, I love his work ethic. I also do love his experience that he's had in college under Dan Lanning in Oregon. But I also do love that he is a student of the game. So I think you put him next to a guy like Sean Payton. I feel like that this could be a potential mesh that Broncos fans have been waiting for years, because I could not stress this enough. They have not organically built a quarterback through the draft since John Elway out of Stanford. And I'm just like, it's okay if you can. Because if you whiff on one, you got an opportunity for another one at some point. Because even next year's quarterback class is actually going to be not too bad. It's going to be actually pretty decent. So, I mean, this is probably the time to start doing so, right?
I mean, yeah. The thing with that is I mean, sure, if a guy like Bo Nix falls to you at 12, you got best player on the board, and you need a quarterback badly. I think it's going to be, honestly, with Bo Nix, I think it's more of a curiosity pick than it's going to be this guy's it, this guy's the answer, this is the end all be all. I think if you see the Broncos move up in the draft and trade to move up in the draft, then they really love that guy, and they really think that that's what's going to be the solution here long term. If Bo Nix falls to them, I'm sure they'll probably take him. But I don't think it's an end all be all. I mean, and to your point, Jake, of the Broncos not drafting and developing and it's been kind of a stigma of this franchise since its very inception of being very gun shy when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. And the only successful one we had was John Elway, and that wasn't even really by way of drafting. It was just by way of holdout and negotiating. It was technically a trade, is what it was. And so, yeah, I to your point about all of that is the Broncos. The only thing that the whole fan base is feeling right now, as far as I can tell and gather, is you got to hit now. You got to hit on these draft picks now. Like it's not just quarterback. It's the offensive line that's terrible. To me, quarterback is somewhat of importance, but I feel like if you draft a quarterback and you do nothing to rebuild your offensive line and you bring a kid in here, he's just going to get slaughtered and he's going to get beat up and hit all season long. And I understand that's kind of the growing pains of the quarterback, so they can adjust to the speed of the game, adjust to the whole entire NFL as a whole. But you don't also want a situation where the quarterback's 1-2 years in and he has a career-ending injury and that's done and it's over, because that's just going to add on to the already decades plus of PTSD that this organization has with drafting quarterbacks. I mean, we technically drafted Jay Cutler. That kind of sort of worked out, not necessarily the way the Broncos had hoped. So, and then obviously with the Paxton Lynch situation, drafting him and him not turning out to what it would be, the Broncos have really just got their quarterbacks via free agency or trade. That's been the gist of it. Obviously, the most famous one being of Peyton Manning, getting him in 2012. So, I go back and forth with it constantly, as these days go on before we get to the draft of, well, maybe we should move up, but you also try and look at that. Should you move up? I mean, it's going to at least cost you at least 2 firsts, if not 3. And it's like, do you want to mortgage your future again that badly to go and get a guy and basically have no future in the draft, unless your plan is to rebuild it around that guy through strictly free agency or trade? Then, I mean, but I have seen other things happen too. I mean, the Broncos only had, I think it was a total of 3 or 4 picks in these next 2 years. They've now traded and acquired more picks through trade. And granted, they're like 5th and 6th rounders. They're not necessarily 1st and 2nd rounders, but they have more draft capital now. I don't, things can be done and have been done. If there's one thing I've learned about this new age of the NFL is teams can finagle stuff when they really want to. There are loopholes through things, but ultimately I feel like the ultimate proven process has been, since this league's inception in modern day, has been to rebuild through the draft. That's the only way you win. I mean, you see it now with the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of those guys, they drafted. Some of them they got by trade, some of them they got by free agency. But for the majority of those stars on that team, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, they drafted those guys and developed them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, and you're absolutely right to the point of it, because ultimately, if you have a smart enough GM, and I always say this all the time, you got a smart enough GM that knows how to work the financial system, and at the same time, just knows how to put together a bargain deal. I mean, I've always said it. If you have the Howie Roseman like wizardry, that he just basically gets guys, top rounded guys for like 6th, 5th round guys. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I mean, it's a similar thing. Even when we look at hockey, you get GMs that know how to work the LTIR. For many people out there in the back who keep thinking that Vegas keeps manipulating the LTIR, all 16 teams are doing the same thing. So it's like you got to get with the program eventually. So, but I think,
and to that too, Jake, I also want to say just a really quick thing. I honestly think that George Paton has received a lot of unfair criticism throughout this whole entire situation. I mean, the franchise got sold. There was new ownership. What else was he supposed to do? I mean, a lot of moves happened. Yes, they were under technically his tenure, but at the same time, people forget to look at the fans. The one thing that fans that I hope to bring with this new show here, the South Stands, is fans often forget to look at the business side of this. The NFL is a league. Football is a sport, but it is also a business. I mean, that is also a very important component of the NFL. It is a business, and sometimes teams will make moves strictly out of business, and fans, for the most part, don't like it. And I can see that side of it. But you're going to bolster the sale of a team, and the current regime that he was under tells him probably to do certain things, like go out and get a Russell Wilson so it can bolster the value of this franchise. You're going to listen to your bosses ultimately, because yes, George Payton does have somewhat of a pen stroke within that organization, but he also has marching orders that he is given as well on any given time. And he was hired and he can be fired.
Oh,
just
yeah.
like that. And people tend to forget that. Everybody thinks that GMs are the end all be all. And for the most part, they are given a lot of reign for what they can do with the pen and the paycheck and the checkbook of that organization. But they also do have somewhat of guidelines and bosses to answer to as well.
Yeah, and especially with the unnecessary amount of expectation and the pressure that it takes for that. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you even
Pressured
look
by
at
the league. The Broncos were being pressured by the NFL to sell the team.
Yeah,
They were being
100%.
pressured. The league said, "Hey, if you don't get this done within the next 2 years, we will facilitate a sale. We will do it. We will find a suitor for you." People forget that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, you have to figure out those solutions. And so, yeah, no matter how high the stakes get, I mean, if you're willing to make that right move, that's going to, at the very least, get the team on the same page. And at the same time, you're making it better to where that's what's allowing the culture change to really happen, like the culture reshape. And so, yeah, no, I totally agree with it because, yeah, we all have bosses we answer to. And so it's like, in the end, there's expectations, but at the same time, they are also expecting results. So it's like it has to basically happen, and you have a certain time window because I mean, in the NFL, they always say it all the time, not for long. It never lasts long. So you gotta make up the time you got now and make it work right. So I think that this. Okay, the hip drop rule I think is the most egregious and the most atrocious rule I think I've ever seen in my life. I do, however, I was at the point where I liked it when the kickoff rule changed because now there's not going to be a whole lot of touchbacks. Returners are going to get more involved. The only thing I'm curious to watch is the pause between the attackers and the defenders. That's going to be a little different there because of the attackers. That's just making sure everybody in the special teams, they're on their toes. That's what it feels like this rule has to be. You got to come up with something very, very clever in order to work that special teams department, but have everybody all on their toes because you cannot skip a beat. So, I mean, this hip drop rule, I don't know. I don't know what honestly to even make of this. I think it's egregious and atrocious, and at the same time, I do not see this kind of rule lasting very long at all in the league.
Yeah, I mean, with these types of rules, I mean, I was born in the 90s, grew up in the 90s. To me, I mean, there was still the before the concussion stuff and all this came out. Ever since the concussion stuff and the realization of concussions and the long-term effects of what football does to a human being and their brain, I honestly feel like the NFL has been sort of and to put it metaphorically, chasing rainbows with these types of rules. I mean, you're not going to prevent concussions completely. If you're going to do that and that is your goal, then you might as well just take away all the equipment and put flags on everybody and let's play flag football, because that's the only way you're going to stop concussions completely. There's certain rules and laws of physics and inertia and all that stuff that just tell you that if somebody's running at full speed, the only way to stop that is something that is not. and that has results to human beings and their brains. And at this point in time, I wish the NFL would just say, look, we're doing all we can. We've done all we can, but we're not going to continue down the slippery slope and for the cost of the integrity of the game, because that's what's happening right now. I don't mean to sound like, the old man screaming on his lawn, but at the same time, it's like this sport has been I understand that everything evolves too, and everything has to evolve, and change is inevitable. But when you're doing it to the tune of basically sacrificing the integrity of football and what it is and what it has meant for a long time, I do feel like changes were necessary to kind of lessen concussions. But we need to. I feel like everybody needs to agree here. Like, you can't eliminate it completely, and it's going to happen. And you know, I honestly think it would be probably more beneficial for the NFL to just institute a concussion rule on careers and say, you've had X amount of concussions, you can't play anymore. Because I feel like that's the only way that, and I know a lot of fans that doesn't sound like a popular solution either, because then you're gonna be like, well, how they know that's going to shorten careers and all that. And it's like, yeah, well, I mean, careers are short in the NFL anyway, unless you're a marquee player. Your career, I think, is like the average career is at least like 3 years, I think, or less, unless you are a marquee star player. I mean, they're already quick to begin with. And, it's just, I don't know that I don't think there really is a great solution or one cut solution to all this stuff. I just don't, but I don't think that, I think it's not wise of the NFL to continue to sacrifice the integrity of the game, out of fear of being out of fear of being under constant scrutiny for how physical the game is.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that as well. And I'm the kind that I'm just like, for me, it's just basically like you're trying to basically say water should not be wet. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
you're trying to basically tread on water very easily. It's not always going to happen. But I think the one conversation that I don't think a lot of us are having is even after these guys, play their careers. I mean, even their health insurance plans, they can't even cover up for that. And I've heard this from multiple former players who have had such an issue with that, because ultimately these guys, they come into the league, they've got the best insurance plans, they got all this other stuff, they're getting all the fancy schmancy stuff, and then all of a sudden the former ones, they're not getting at least the treatments they should. They're not exactly getting the similar coverage base in order for them to live longer, healthier lives afterward in the game of football. So it's just like, that's a conversation none of us are even having at this point. But I've heard it so much, and I think it is definitely one that the NFL and the PA, and even for the medical side of things, they really need to sit down and they really need to start rethinking this, because in order for it, you're just trying to build the best hopes so that even afterward, they are still respected as the players who wore that uniform and who basically gave their blood, sweat, and tears on the field.
I honestly think the NFL needs to just stop running from what is inevitable and just come out to the public and say, hey, look, this sport is violent. It is just a violent sport by nature. It is a physical sport by nature. And we are going to do all that we can to make sure that the long-term health ramifications are not great on these players, but ultimately it's going to happen. It is what it is. In every other sport, this doesn't seem to be an issue. In hockey, it doesn't seem to be an issue. It is very, very physical sport. They have had some rule changes to lessen concussions, but ultimately they're not really doing anything that wouldn't drastically sacrifice the integrity of that sport. They're the kind of the parameters are in the same. I mean, there's obviously obvious changes that they do. Like you can't hit a player while their head's down. There no more elbows, no more any of that stuff. They've lessened up a lot of the rules that were causing massive amounts of concussions. But at the end of the day, there was an end to that, where that ended. And with football now in the NFL, there seems to be no end to these rule changes, and it quite frankly, it just sucks as a fan, because I mean, I did watch the XFL and the kickoffs there, and it just looks really awkward, to be kind of honest with you. It's just it looks pretty awkward. I understand what they're trying to do, but like, I mean, you could have those defenders and line up 10 yards from each other, but when people start running, ultimately somebody's going to end up running. You're going to run towards, the ball carrier at some point. I mean, at this point, it's just like, it seems like it's changed for minute sake. It's minute changes that ultimately, yeah, are you lessening the risk? Sure, but ultimately that one of the defenders is going to have to run towards the ball carrier, and that they could still have concussions. Yes, is it going to be less? Yes, but I honestly think the NFL just needs to stop running from it and come out and be like, yes, we the concussion stuff was bad, but the sport is very physical, and the laws of science and the laws of physics and gravity say, if we continue to rule change, we're just going to sacrifice the integrity of the sport. And this is what it is. I mean, the players are very well aware of what they're signing up for. They are very well aware now, especially now, because, what are we, like maybe 10, 15 years removed from all the concussion stuff when they first started figuring it out? I mean, if they're not aware at this point, it's a voluntary sport at the end of the day, and people need to realize that. It's completely voluntary. Nobody's holding a gun to any player's head for them to play in the NFL. They choose to do that. And that's why they get paid a lot of money, is because they absolutely ravage their bodies. And there's hardly anything of them left when they're done playing.
Yeah. No, and it really is an interesting outlook as well. And it's one that eventually, hopefully they do get this right. But, again, never ever surprised by how the league ends up running it, especially with what Roger Goodell basically has, because of course he's got his bosses he has to answer to as well. And we'll see. I mean, in the end, the integrity of the sport should exactly be as to what the fans basically tune in and they watch on a daily basis. And so hopefully they do get this straightened out at some point soon. So final thought, before letting you go is the Denver Broncos really they got a lot of work to do. I feel like from a draft analysis perspective, this has to be one they've got to ace this year, because they've lost Lloyd Cushenberry. They've lost Russell Wilson. Now they're going to obviously go with a different quarterback. Yeah, it doesn't make a difference. But the other thing I very much look for is their defense. Losing Justin Simmons, that was a shocker to me. I couldn't even believe that they even decided that this was the move. So this is now a draft they have to completely ace, and it all starts, I'd say, by those two picks that they give. If they go up on that and they start this hot streak of really good underrated picks, I think that will say a lot about what the future of the Broncos is going to look like.
Yeah, I have no worries about defensively, the defensive side of the ball. Ever since probably 1976, the Broncos had not had real trouble assembling really good defenses. So they know how to assemble a defense, and especially now with the safety and the cornerback market kind of being wide open now that they're kind of sort of being devalued in this day and age. I have no worries about that at all. The defensive side, it's the offense I'm concerned about with the Broncos, because that's been the issue since Peyton Manning retired. It's the offensive line. Wide receiving core, I really don't worry about, because I know a lot of people are going to probably be like, how can you say this? But wide receiver position, running back position, those are dime a dozen. They're everywhere, and there's a lot of talent at that position. And so I'm not a type of fan that tends to really get enamored or attached to any one player, because overall I support the team, and whatever they choose to do is the direction we go. Those guys know better than me. I'm just a fan. I'm just an idiot with a microphone, so to speak, that sits in his apartment in Portland, Oregon, and talks about my favorite team. I played 1 year of football, 1 year when I was in 6th grade. I've been watching the game my whole entire life, and I've been watching it from Colorado most of my life, but I only know so much, that's kind of where I want to be honest. And that's kind of the whole point of my show is we're going to give our honest taste as we see it. And we're not going to act like we know everything, because I don't, nobody knows which direction the Broncos are headed in. There's a whole slew of stuff that's going to happen here within these next few months that nobody could predict ever would happen. And some of that might be good. Some of that might be bad. Some of it people are going to agree with, some are going to disagree with. But I think like you said, and we've kind of repeated throughout the show, the one consensus is that Broncos country has is you better nail this draft. Something good better become of this draft. It obviously not the restructuring of the whole entire offense or the team, but either at quarterback or to make a move to go out and get a franchise quarterback needs to happen. It's not an option, quite frankly, to where we sit with this franchise. It's not an option anymore. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. There's no more Peyton Mannings in free agency. There's no more Tom Brady's in free agency. There's none of that anymore. That era is come and gone, and all the elite quarterbacks are not going anywhere. Justin Herbert's not going anywhere. Patrick Mahomes ain't going. Sure as hell ain't going anywhere from the Kansas City Chiefs. So you have no choice but to go get a quarterback through the draft, in my estimation, unless you can make something of an act of God happen to steal one of those big names from a team. You ultimately, I feel like the draft is the correct way to go and see what you got from that. I mean, my final thought, my final warning to all of Broncos country is, I know as a fan base, we've had high expectations for this franchise for a long time, ever since Peyton Manning left, but it's going to be rough these next few years. It's not going to be fun. The majority of games we are going to get our asses handed to us, and it's just, you just got to learn to embrace the suck for a little bit, but it will get better. I think Broncos fans sometimes have some of the shortest amount of patience out of any franchise fan base I've seen, because we have the high expectation of winning. I mean, you take it ever since basically 1997 and on, we've won a lot. There was a long time where we were the team with the NFL record for going the longest without having a losing season. That record was held by the Broncos for a long time, and then we have 8 straight losing seasons and not making a playoff appearance. So, this is just the qualms of football. This is how it happens, and it was a time-changing time for this franchise. Something happened that hadn't happened in almost 50 years. The franchise got sold. It had a new owner. That's a lot of change. That's a lot of drastic change for a franchise that people need to realize where we are as a fan base. And I think people really need to get in touch with that and really level out their expectations and get more realistic about it.
Yeah, great stuff. And you're not lying about that either, because living here in Colorado, I've heard it everywhere. I've heard it all over in the park that I'm in, and they say the same exact thing. The expectations are still so high, but yeah, it's time for change. But at least from your standpoint, you're honest, you're real. That's what's going to be so exciting about this new show, and I cannot wait to tap in and listen to it. Where can people find your now new podcast, Defining, all about what the South Stands is about and what it is always stood for diehard Bronco fans?
Well, I just created an Instagram today. If you guys want to go follow it, it's the South Stands on Instagram. That's pretty much the only social media I plan on running. I might get on TikTok, but we will be right here on the Sports Wave Network as well. You can find out, and then we will be on audio platforms all over the place: Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, whatever you have. We will be on there. Hopefully, I can get us in Spotify in video form too. But yeah, it'll be me, Jeremy Case, and my partner Jacob Gearhart. We'll be doing it. We're gonna start out once a month. We're gonna run it with seasons in accordance to the Broncos season. So once a month until the season starts, and then it'll go weekly after each game during the season until the season is over, and then we will break for free agency and pick it back up again in April of every year. So.
Well, there you go, you guys. That's where you can expect it here on the South Stands podcast. Absolutely glad to even just having you back, man, and especially back and better than ever. And then this is going to be the one I'm really excited about. Bronco fans, you better get ready, because it's going to be a long haul ride from here on out. So appreciate you coming on by, Jeremy, and showcasing your show. Appreciate you, man. Hopefully we'll see what happens from here on draft night, but I know it's going to be so ecstatic from here. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, our first episode will be up April 1st, and then we will do one right after the draft. So those will be our first 2 episodes.
There you go, guys. Definitely keep it up on your calendars. All righty, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. Mm-hmm. There you go, guys. April 1st, that's where you could expect the South Stands podcast and a proud show, now a part of the Sports Wave Network. And as people know, Jeremy, very knowledgeable when it comes to everything Denver Broncos, and it also when it comes to, the NFL as a whole. And again, you could think of it however you want to. It doesn't matter. But you could get as honest and real and as creative as you possibly can. And ultimately, it provides for quality, for quality television, for quality viewing. It's going to be so, I'm ecstatic about it. And yes, living here in Denver, I hear it everywhere. I hear it all over. And so, yeah, I think this will be a really, really fun draft night with all these moves that's currently happening. But yeah, I think this will be really, really something else to watch. All righty, guys, that's going to do it here for me on the Snake Sports Talk Show presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. As you guys know, diehard fans of the show, love it every time we have an all-star cast lineup of great interviewers. Shout out to Connor Webb, Couch GM. Absolutely great. I'm excited to see what the Seattle Mariners are going to honestly look like for the MLB season. Jeremy Case, shout out to him. South Stands podcast, April 1st. Do not miss the inaugural episode here on Sports Wave Network and also on the South Stands podcast. You guys do not want to end up missing that. The show is sponsored by SeatGeek and BetUS. Don't lose your seat today with SeatGeek when you use promo code SnakeSports to get $20 off of your first purchase of your first ticket on the most reliable ticketing app on the market. For your next event, whether sporting event, your next concert, to your favorite artist to get you closer into the action, and either your favorite comedy shows, art shows, whatever it may be, SeatGeek has you covered on all of it. Go to SeatGeek.com, download it on your mobile device, your Google Play in the App Store, and find your seat with SeatGeek. Also on BetUS, definitely go to BetUS.com as the $10,000 contest is still rolling for the Sweet 16 for all you March Madness fanatics out there when you put $100 down on your deposit or more. Free entry into the contest. All you got to do is go to BetUS.com, put down your $100 deposit or more, and you get your free ticket into it. Enjoy all of what the sports books at BetUS have and casino play. All here on BetUS.com. BetUS, where the game begins. Jake Silva signing off. Appreciate you guys being here on the show. We will see you guys soon.